Bills Mafia, the news we feared has finally arrived. What started as a quiet concern after the Panthers game has now been confirmed. Ed Oliver has suffered a torn biceps and will require surgery. According to reports, his recovery is expected to take roughly 3 months, which means Buffalo's dominant defensive tackle likely won't return until the postseason, if the Bills can hold the line until then. This is a huge blow. Ed Oliver wasn't just another piece on the line, he was the heartbeat of the interior defense. His burst off the snap, his pressure on the quarterback, his leadership, that's not something you replace overnight. Right now, the Bills' defensive tackle depth chart looks thin, with Daquan Jones and Larry Ogunjobi being the only healthy interior linemen available. The front office now faces a crucial decision: how do you fill a gap this big in the middle of a playoff push? The options are limited. There are a few potential moves on the table, from practice squad elevations to external trades, but let's be honest, there's no one out there who can fully replicate Ed Oliver's production. Before we dive deeper into the possible replacements and what's next for Buffalo's defense, before listening to the latest news, subscribe to the channel, like it, and don't forget to press the bell icon. Let's move on to the new news. Now, back to the trenches. The Bills have already used multiple practice squad elevations this season. Jordan Phillips, for example, made an impact against the Panthers with a sack, but his elevation count is nearly maxed out. Zion Logue and Fedarian Mathis are in similar positions, limited opportunities left before the team must make a decision: sign them to the active 53-man roster or move on. Given their flashes of potential, Zion Logue or Jordan Phillips seem like the most likely candidates to be promoted permanently. Both have stepped up in short bursts and shown they can handle limited snaps, but the Bills might still look externally for more experience, especially with Daquan Jones also dealing with a nagging calf injury. Head coach Sean McDermott didn't rule out the possibility of Jones landing on injured reserve, which would be another massive setback. Calf injuries are tricky: push them too soon, and they can turn into something far worse, even leading to Achilles complications. So here's the bottom line: Buffalo's defensive interior is walking a fine line between survival and collapse. The coaching staff will have to get creative, the front office will have to stay aggressive, and the rest of the defense must step up until Ed Oliver returns. Because without him, the heartbeat of that line, the Bills' playoff hopes just got a lot more complicated. When it comes to Daquan Jones, the Bills are walking a tightrope. He's a veteran presence, a force in the middle, but right now, the smartest play might be patience. Jones is battling a calf injury, and while he's eager to get back, both he and the team know the risk. He's also in a contract year, meaning every snap he takes, or rushes back to take, could determine his next payday. One wrong move, one re-aggravation, and that opportunity could vanish in an instant. Buffalo can't afford to lose him the way they've already lost others. Dwayne Carter, who went down earlier in the season with a torn Achilles, is out for the year. That injury was a brutal reminder of what happens when a player pushes the limits too soon. Jones has seen that firsthand, and you can bet it's weighing heavily on his mind. The good news? There's still T.J. Sanders, the promising second-round pick, waiting in the wings. He's currently on short-term injured reserve, but the expectation inside the building is that he'll be back soon. The Bills invested heavily in Sanders for a reason: his combination of size, power, and athleticism made him one of the most intriguing defensive line prospects in the draft. Buffalo needs him healthy and back in the rotation if they're going to stabilize that front before the playoff push. And with the trade deadline just around the corner, the conversation inside one Bills drive is heating up. While fans have been fixated on wide receivers, and who wouldn't be, given the chatter around that position, the team's real crisis might be on defense. The interior line is bruised, battered, and dangerously thin. That's why one name keeps resurfacing: a familiar face who could immediately fit right back into the system: Harrison Phillips. Once a fan favorite in Buffalo, Phillips was originally drafted by Brandon Beane nearly 5 years ago. He knows this defense, he knows the culture, and most importantly, he knows what it means to wear that Bills jersey. Now with the New York Jets, Phillips would be a logical trade target if Buffalo decides to shore up the middle before the postseason stretch. His work ethic, leadership, and locker room presence made him beloved in Western New York, and right now, those are exactly the kind of traits this defense needs. The reality is simple: with Oliver out, Jones nursing a calf injury, and multiple backups banged up, the Bills don't just need depth, they need trustworthy production. Whether it comes from a returning rookie, a well-timed trade, or a familiar reunion with a player who once anchored their line, Buffalo's front office has one mission: keep this defense intact long enough for the cavalry to return. Because in a season where every inch matters, the Bills' battle in the trenches could define whether this team's story ends in heartbreak, or in history. When you talk about reliable run defenders, Harrison Phillips fits the mold perfectly. He's not flashy, he's fundamental. The kind of player who eats double teams, controls gaps, and gives his linebackers room to fly. This season with the Jets, he's been quietly productive, recording a forced fumble, half a sack, and consistently holding his ground against the run. But even with solid play, it feels like Phillips could use a fresh start. And where better than Buffalo, the city where he made his name? He knows the system, understands the culture, and most importantly, fits the physical brand of football Sean McDermott wants in the trenches. Bringing Phillips back wouldn't just make sense, it could stabilize a defensive front that's been tested to its limits. For Deion Walker, the rising young interior lineman, a veteran like Phillips could help lighten the load. He wouldn't need to play 60% of the snaps, just be that steady, dependable presence who brings both leadership and grit. With his contract locked in through 2026 on a team-friendly deal, this is exactly the kind of smart, low-risk move Brandon Beane is known for. If the front office can't land a receiver before the deadline, a call to the Jets about Phillips could be the perfect pivot. But if Buffalo wants to go big, there's one name that could change everything: Jeffery Simmons. At 28 years old, Simmons is still right in his prime and remains one of the most dominant interior linemen in football. He's the kind of player who doesn't just stop plays, he destroys them. Right now, he's stuck on a 1-6 Tennessee Titans team that's clearly in rebuild mode. With the Titans searching for draft capital and long-term direction, Simmons' future could be in play. For Buffalo, the idea is tantalizing. Plug Simmons next to an eventually healthy Ed Oliver, and suddenly the Bills' defensive line becomes a nightmare for every offensive coordinator in the AFC. The run defense? Fixed. The pass rush? Supercharged. Simmons brings power, explosiveness, and a relentless motor that makes him one of the few true game wreckers in the league. The issue, of course, is cost. A player of Simmons' caliber won't come cheap, it would take a first-rounder, likely more, plus the willingness to absorb nearly $50 million over the next 2 seasons. That's a massive financial commitment for a team already managing several high-value contracts. And yet, imagine the possibilities. A Buffalo front featuring Simmons, Oliver, Rousseau, and Von Miller. That's championship-level disruption. The kind of front four that changes playoff games, wrecks pocket rhythm, and tilts the field in Buffalo's favor. The Bills have always prided themselves on being aggressive when the window is open, and right now, that window is still open. Whether it's the familiar face of Harrison Phillips or the superstar impact of Jeffery Simmons, the message is the same: the Buffalo Bills are not backing down. Even in the face of injuries and adversity, this team's identity is clear: fight, adapt, and keep pushing for that one goal that's eluded them for decades. The road ahead won't be easy, but for Bills Mafia, the belief remains stronger than ever. This is Buffalo. This is resilience. And this story, it's far from over. When it comes to potential moves, the Buffalo Bills are standing at a crossroads. There's a huge difference between bringing back a familiar face like Harrison Phillips for a mid to late round pick and swinging big for a superstar like Jeffery Simmons, which would cost a fortune in draft capital. The question now isn't just about money or picks, it's about timing and direction. Buffalo has to decide what kind of team they want to be in this moment. Are they going all in, ready to sacrifice the future for a dominant playoff run? Or do they believe the current roster, once healthy, can weather the storm and make a push without mortgaging long-term assets. If the Bills want reliability, Phillips makes sense. He knows the locker room, the playbook, and the city. He'd slide right back into a defense that values toughness and gap control. A late-round pick for a proven run defender is the kind of steady, low-risk move that fits Buffalo's long-term vision. But if this front office wants to make a statement, if they want to say, "This is our year," then Simmons is the move that does it. His arrival would immediately transform the Bills' defensive front into one of the most feared in the league. It would also send a message to the rest of the AFC that Buffalo is done waiting. Still, the price tag is heavy. Trading for Simmons would likely cost a first-round pick, a mid-round selection, and possibly another future asset, not to mention his massive contract. For a team already managing elite-level deals for stars like Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, that's a serious commitment. So the debate inside one Bills drive likely comes down to two words: impact versus investment. Phillips represents stability and familiarity, Simmons represents explosion and dominance. Both would strengthen the defense, but only one would reshape it entirely. And as the trade deadline ticks closer, the urgency is growing. Buffalo's defensive interior is battered, their depth stretched thin, and the pressure to stay competitive in the AFC is as high as ever. With the Ed Oliver injury changing the entire defensive picture, Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott have to move with precision and confidence. But Phillips and Simmons aren't the only names in play. Another intriguing option could come from the Houston Texans, where defensive tackle Malik Collins has quietly put together solid tape over the past few seasons. In fact, his name surfaced among potential trade targets even before the Oliver injury. Collins isn't a superstar, but he's versatile, dependable, and plays with an aggressive edge that fits Buffalo's defensive identity.